I'm Jim Cunningham, and today we are going to talk about pet trusts, planning for your four-legged friends. I guess your pet might have fewer than four legs as well. This, again, I'm a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is a disclaimer. You do not want to do this stuff on your own, not a do-it-yourself project. You want to get a competent lawyer and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can go ahead and click subscribe. You can also share this with people who might find this informational or educational or have an interest in providing for their pets. We're a law firm with offices in Northern and Southern California, and we handle nothing but trust and estate matters. So all things sort of financial legacy planning. I am the CEO and partner at CunninghamLegal, and I have over 25 years experience. I help clients in California. We also have attorneys who are licensed in other states, Missouri, Texas, Virginia, the state of Washington, and the District of Columbia. A certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. There aren't many of those, and I'm one of them, and we have others in our firm as well. I'm also securities and insurance licensed and a pilot and an author. So we have our second edition of our book out, Savvy Estate Planning, What You Need to Know Before You Go to the Right Lawyer. It's full of stories, not boring black letter law. And this is Lola. So my wife and I, a few years ago, I actually ran over our dog, which is horrible. And I share that because after talking to people, totally by accident, but it's not an uncommon thing. And then our daughters, of course, were devastated. And then at the time they were in high school, and we ended up adopting Lola, who we think is an Affenpinscher, but we haven't done the DNA test, which means ape dog in German. So she's a cutie. If you have a rescue dog, you know what I'm talking about. They just kind of always want to be at your side. So let's talk about the pet trust. So are you one of those people that's worried about your pets if you pass away? It used to be, and not that long ago, it used to be you could not create a pet trust in the state of California. You just couldn't do it. But California law changed. California is really on the forefront of a lot of things. Love it or hate it, California is there's a lot of change happening in California all the time. And one of the things that they've done is they've allowed, the legislature's allowed the creation of a pet trust. So it's tricky because typically, first of all, you have to do this just right. And there's a lot of gotchas in there. But, normally a beneficiary, it's a person who receives it's from Latin, receiving the goods, bene, the good. The person who's receiving the beneficial interest in the trust is typically the person who is going to enforce the terms of the trust. If the trustee goes off the rails, if the trustee steals, who's going to hold the trustee accountable? Typically, it's a beneficiary. It's kind of hard for your little four-legged friend with a snout to enforce their rights, other than licking the trustee to death, whatever it is. Just not going to happen, right? It's a dog. So California has a workaround on that. And we're going to cover kind of the ins and outs. And, we typically don't get too technical, but these are very, very technical, sort of esoteric type trusts. And you need to pay attention to all the details, and we're going to cover those. So the pet trust, it's a new thing. Again, it used to be that trusts could only be created for people or charitable purposes or entities. But it makes sense, right? Because only humans can enforce their rights. But now pets, we have a mechanism where other people can enforce the pet's rights. So what are the requirements? Well, first of all, it has to be in writing. Okay. This is something that is typically incorporated into your revocable living trust. And this pet trust continues for as long as there are living pets at your death. So this is kind of narrowly focused. So this isn't like, oh, I want to care for my dogs and while I'm alive, so I'm going to set up this trust and put money in it. Well, it doesn't really make sense because you would just pay for the dog. You would just pay the vet bill out of your own personal pocket anyway, right? So a pet trust is created typically at death. Now, if you're incapacitated, right? If you have no, if you have a stroke and you can't do for yourself and others are doing for you, this provision is typically included, or this ability to pay for pet expenditures is typically included in your durable power of attorney. So it's very important. Make sure the person you choose isn't just going to euthanize your pets, right? Make sure they don't have that cold of a heart, that they want to continue to support those animals while you're alive, because for many people, it's tremendous companionship. Okay, so you pass away, this trust is created. We take a snapshot. Okay, who are all the pets that are alive when you pass away? And the money that goes into this pet trust is used exclusively for the benefit of the animal and not the trustee. So what that means is this money must be used for the pets. The trustee can't just take money out and, treat it like the trustee's own money. And when the trust terminates, the property goes to what we call residual beneficiaries, or the people who get the stuff after you get the leftovers, right? So if you put 100,000 or 50,000 into a pet trust and you spend 40, when that pet dies, there's 10,000 left. Someone's going to get that 10,000. So you should have a provision in there that says when the pets die, this is who gets the money. Typically, a well-written pet trust will contain that. Otherwise, if it does not contain that, then we look at the will, your will, right? Even if you have a living trust, we look at your will. If you have a living trust, most wills say everything goes to our living trust. So you would look to the living trust. Kind of complicated, but the point is, it's really important that if you do set up a pet trust and you do put 50,000 in it, I'm not suggesting you put 50 or 100 or whatever the number is. You should make a provision who gets that money when the pet passes away. So in our example here, and as we go through our time together here, we're going to talk about this example. So Owen, who is the owner, and this is, from law school, Owen has a living trust, and his living trust contains a pet trust where he gives $50,000 to Tina, whose name begins with a T. Tina's the trustee. See how the logic here? So Owen's the owner, Tina's the trustee, and the trustee holds his $50,000 for the care of Rover. I know it's not particularly creative on the dog name, but Tina must use the $50,000 for Rover's care. And then when Rover dies, the leftovers, so whatever's remaining in the trust, go to Ben, who's the beneficiary, right? Who's Owen's beneficiary under the terms of the trust. So what if Tina says, I'm just going to put Rover in the kennel and take some of this money and go to Tahiti for a week? Yeah, that's embezzlement. That's a crime. All right. But who's to enforce it? Rover, he's just like, I'm in a kennel. Who's going to enforce the fact that Tina stole this money and used it on a great trip to Tahiti? So the trust, in this case, Owen can designate a person to enforce the trust. So Owen could pick his brother, Bob, right? He could say, hey, Bob, you're the enforcer on this trust. You're sort of you're the one who's paying attention to it. But typically it's going to be the remainder beneficiaries. It's often the case. And so in this case, it would be Ben. Ben can step forward and say, hey, Tina, I saw you posting those pictures on Facebook and I heard Rover was put in a kennel and I know you don't have that kind of money. What's going on? So Ben's entitled to information. Otherwise, a person can be appointed by the probate court. Now, you may go, whoa, probate court, what are you talking about? I thought we're talking about trusts. So, the whole reason you do a living trust is to stay out of probate court, which is 100% true. But something you need to know in California, under California law, when we talk about trusts, when we want to know what trust law is, we actually go to the probate code. So California is a codified state, meaning we have state statutes, we have a constitution and statutes, and that's the primary driver of law. And the trust law provisions are contained within the probate code. That is not the case with other states. Some states do have a trust code. California just hasn't done that. So a person can be appointed by the probate court to oversee the pet trust. But others can step in too. So any beneficiary named in Owen's living trust, any beneficiary can step forward. Any beneficiary interested in the welfare of Rover. Now, who might that be? Well, it might be Rover's breeder, right? It could be maybe, a friend of Owen's. Then they kind of met at the dog park to walk their dogs around. It's a very broad class of people. And then any nonprofit charitable organization that has as its principal activity the care of animals. So even though Rover is a dog, it could be the cat people, and I say that with a big heart, not disparagingly. It could be the people who have who have a heart for cats, and they go, we really like cats, and we kind of like dogs too, but cats are different. And the cat people can come in and say, hey, Rover's not being taken care of. So it's really a very broad scope of people. And I do want to, this is actually one thing that happened while I was in practice. I was in court in Ventura County years and years ago in front of Judge Glenn Reeser. We have a YouTube video with Glenn on our talking about estate planning and the importance of it. And I'd encourage you to check that out. He's a really great guy. I was sitting in court and I was stunned. Probate court, a person in their will ordered the executor to euthanize all of their animals. They had 10 dogs, and the will said, you have to euthanize all these dogs. And the judge, to his credit, asked the lawyer, what is this? This is horrible. And how many dogs have been euthanized? And at that point, 5 had been euthanized. And the judge said, I am ordering the executor not to do that, to stop euthanizing those dogs. And the judge found homes for those 5 dogs with the court staff. I mean, it was really amazing. So something to be aware is the probate court really is the ultimate, has the ultimate authority to tell people what they can and can't do, even euthanizing animals, right? So if Ben thinks that Tina's stealing, Ben reaches out to a lawyer who brings an action in the probate court to have Tina removed and for her to return the money she stole. Now, you might think, well, that's kind of probably an expensive process and kind of cumbersome, and it takes a long time. And that's absolutely right. A better way to remove Tina is through a trust protector. And I have a screenshot here of one of our videos on trust protectors on our YouTube page. I really encourage you to take a look at it. A trust protector is a person who has power over the trust, but is not the trustee. A trust protector can remove Tina, but a trust protector cannot, a trust protector can ask Tina to produce an accounting, but that's about it. A court can compel Tina to produce an accounting. And if she doesn't produce it, ultimately has the power to throw her in jail. So a trust protector does not have that power, but at least the trust protector can remove a bad trustee. And so a practice tip here, in the real world, consider use of a trust protector when you have a pet trust. Now, we'll say about half of lawyers out there that do estate planning have never even heard of a trust protector. And those who have, very few of those use those in practice, because I think they just don't have the depth of knowledge. That is not the case in our firm. We've got a lot of knowledge, and we routinely name trust protectors in estate plans. So remember, all trusts always need a trustee, even pet trusts. So a lot of people say, look, I do a living trust, and when I die, this thing just, everything happens automatically. No one has to do anything. Well, that's just simply not true. Somebody has to sign papers. Somebody has to have stuff notarized. Somebody has to figure out, okay, there's a pet trust. How many dogs were there? How many cats, whatever the turtles, whatever the animals are. And somebody needs to have a record of that. So there's a lot of stuff that has to happen. And that's really the trustee's role. So again, there must always be a trustee. If Tina dies, so let's say Owen creates his trust, creates a pet trust for Rover, and then Owen dies. Okay, so there's Rover, and we got $50,000 for Rover. And Tina, let's say she doesn't use the money to go to Tahiti. She's using the money for Rover's care and feeding and, whatever Rover needs. And then Tina dies. Okay. But Rover's still alive. We need a trustee for that pet trust. So what do? Well, we look at the trust itself. And so I would encourage you, if you have an estate plan, if you have a living trust, look at the living trust and find out who the people are that are successor trustees. So, you can have one person named as successor trustee. You might want to have more than one named. So we go back to the original trust and we look at who the successor trustee is, and that person fills in Tina's shoes. And if there's no next in line, if you've run out of trustees or they don't want to do it, you go to probate court to have a trustee appointed, or you can have a trust protector appoint a successor trustee. So, a trust protector, again, is going to keep you out of court. Oftentimes, trusts will have a provision where the then acting trustee, the person who's serving as trustee, can appoint a successor trustee. All right, so Owen's passed away. We funded the trust with $50,000. Tina's taking care of Rover. A couple years go by, and people kind of want to know, hey, how's Rover doing? And what's happening with that $50,000? Okay, so Tina must account to the people who inherit when Rover dies. So in this case, Ben is the recipient of that $50,000. When Rover dies, Tina has an affirmative obligation under law to provide Ben with an accounting. And, an accounting is a process. So Tina's got to keep track of all her expenses, any receipts, any disbursements, and summarize her activities and analyze everything and report to Ben, who's a beneficiary, or to a court. So if a court orders you, or the trust protector, if the trust protector asks, or again, any non-profitable charitable corporation that has its principal activity the care of animals, right? That's requested those accounting. So again, the cat people can step forward and say, hey, Ben's not paying enough attention. We want to know, how's this money being used for Rover? Okay. Or the dog people can come forward. So pet trusts are embedded into California law. This is the probate code section 15212. There is an exception to the accounting rule. If you have less than $40,000 in the trust, there's no accounting requirement. So no one can be compelled to account unless you're ordered by the court, or the pet trust itself says, hey, even if it's a small amount, you still have to account for the funds. Now, in many cases, the accounting will be kind of easy. It'll be the bank statement and an explanation. Okay, so sometimes the information that's on the bank statement, that's pretty much it. And then you have to have a narrative on there. If you're the trustee of a trust, one thing I would highly recommend you do not do is don't use a debit card if you're a trustee on a fiduciary account, because if a trustee takes cash out, there's no record of what happened. You're better off using your own cash and then seeking reimbursement with documentation. So taking money with an ATM card out of a trust account, not your own living trust. I'm talking about if you're trustee for somebody else, this would be TINA. It's a really bad idea, and it's a really good way to get you removed as trustee. We have a whole webinar on that I did with Randy Catnese, by the way. That was a few weeks ago on basically bad trustees, how you can get into trouble. So a trust protector can compel the accounting, even if there's less than 40,000. So who ensures that Rover is cared for? Well, any beneficiary named in the trust, or a person designated in the trust. So you can say, you can just leave it be default that, if you have kids, my kids are making sure my dog's taken care of, or you can designate a third party, a court, or the trust protector, or again, any charitable organization that cares for pets. And what is an animal? All right. This is a really good question. So they actually define it. Animal means a domestic or pet animal for the benefit of which a trust has been established. So you're creating a trust for the benefit of a domestic or pet animal. Dogs, cats, horses. Think about what's not included. A cheetah running around on the plains of Africa, probably not included. Okay. If you want to protect habitat, if you want to protect wildlife and wild animals, probably a pet trust isn't the way to go. You would want to leave some money to a charity that is aligned with your goals. So if you want to preserve bird habitat, you can leave it to the bird habitat people. But I'm not sure that you could say, I want to protect egrets, and so I'm going to create this charitable trust for these egrets that live in my neighborhood. That's really not a pet animal. That's a wild animal. So I do want to finish up here with some pet trust alternatives. San Francisco SPCA, I believe it was the first SPCA in the country. They have a CITO program that gives you peace of mind about the fate of your animal, because many times people, they just want to know that their animal is going to be taken care of. I did a pet trust for a client. She left a house and about $1 million cash because she wanted her 3 horses to live at her house and not be euthanized, right? And live out their days in green pastures. So we set that up for her. And but there are some alternatives. Okay. This particular one, San Francisco SPCA, does have an adoption program where they adopt out your pet and they provide medical care, and they're a great organization to support. And they help with food preferences and medical history and all that good stuff. So that's something you would do directly with an organization, like whether it's this organization or some other organization. You would do this and specify what you want. So best practices and tips. Again, pet trusts are often incorporated into the terms of your living trust. So we typically don't see a standalone pet trust. Also, mindfulness about who will handle the money and who's going to make sure your pet is cared for properly. You want to make sure that, sometimes those are different people. Sometimes they're the same person, but somebody who's really good with animals may not be good with money, and vice versa, right? And so have some mindfulness about that and choose wisely, and consider a trust protector as well as some alternatives. And that's something that any lawyer in our firm can help you with. should you choose to reach out to us, it's like, hey, this is really on my mind. I want to make sure that my pets are cared for. What's the best way to do that? And we handle that on a case-by-case basis. This is part of getting your A team together. Okay. Get your A team together for the stuff and the people that you care about. And it typically consists of your lawyer, your CPA, and your financial advisor. These are the three-legged stools. And the pet trust is going to fall pretty much on the lawyer's on the lawyer's punch list. And that is the end. We do have questions, so we will answer your questions here. Do you have Daniel asked, do you have a recommendation for a minimum amount of cash to give to a pet trust? I think it's case specific, but it could be 5,000, it could be 10,000, it could be 50. But I think it's really depends on the longevity of the animal. If you look at a dog that may have 5 years remaining on its life, if you calculate the cost of veterinary care, maybe they're on a care plan, an insurance plan, and you calculate the food, and then you calculate grooming and maybe kenneling if you need if that's appropriate, whatever it is, you kind of factor in all those expenses and then kind of work backwards from there. Horses are much more expensive than dogs. So I think it's also dependent on the animal. So I have a lot of experience cleaning up after horses. I grew up with horses. So, for those of you who know what I'm talking about, this is our YouTube page. We've got a lot of YouTube content, and it's a great resource. We live in such a great time to be a human. We've got so many learning alternatives out there and learning options. And this is how you access to make an appointment, right? You can request an appointment, click that button, and you can self-schedule a 15-minute call. And subscribe to our YouTube page and go ahead and share that. Review us on Google, and I will finish it out with any remaining questions. And it looks like that's about it. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.